We recorded a live podcast the other night and had some audio difficulties during the show that we then tried to diagnose during the show. So I am releasing an edited version. It's going to be missing some parts because we're just going to skip over those and skip the parts where the audio issue was happening. But you get most of the content still. Sorry about that. We are working on trying to figure out exactly what went wrong. Really didn't have any differences from previous podcast setups. So I'm not sure, but we're working on trying to figure that out. One of the questions that we didn't get to answer that I've been meaning to answer for quite some time, so I want to do it right now at the beginning. Roger asked this, and actually Tony too, both, and it's kind of about your depth of field. Well, it's not kind of, it's about your depth of field. First question from Roger is, do you need to take into account the crop factor when calculating your depth of field? Yes, you do. The place I always go when I need to calculate out my depth of field is the Depth of Field Master. I'll put a link to that right down below. It is a nice little website. It's just drop downs. You pick the camera you're working with. And so then if you say I'm working with a 70D or a D72, 7200, not quite yet, D7100, it will take into account the crop factors for those cameras and then use those in its calculation of the depth of field. The second question that is related to this is about the depth of field preview button. Now this is something that most Canon cameras have. Not all Nikons have it. The lower end model Nikons, D5300, 5500 do not have a depth of field preview button, but the D7100 does, and other models like that. On the Canon, it is a small nondescript button on the side. And many people don't know this, but when you are composing your image, either through the viewfinder or live view, your aperture is set at its maximum aperture for the lens. So the amount of light coming in is nice and bright and you can see what you're getting. Only when you press the depth of field preview button do the aperture blades close down to whatever you've asked the camera to set your aperture at, or if it's in automatic mode, whatever the camera has decided to set its aperture at. Or the other time the aperture blades close down is when you actually take the picture. So they close and they reopen to their maximum. When would you use the depth of field preview button? Well, when you want to get a good sense of what your image is going to actually look like. To be honest, I don't use mine very often because it's just so easy to take a picture and review the actual picture and get a sense. But if you were inclined to really not take a picture until you wanted to get the picture correct, the depth of field preview button is going to allow you to see what your image is going to look like and give you a sense of the depth of field in the image before you actually take a picture. All right, now let's roll the bits of the podcast that are worth watching. We have an image critique that is coming up this week as well. And remember, we're going to be traveling in Montana, so we will be getting out some daily videos as long as our internet is good. Thanks so much. Welcome back. I'm glad to be here because it means I'm feeling so much better. Thank you for your patience and understanding. So nice. So many people messaged and said, you know, I hope you're feeling better. I'm definitely feeling much better. I haven't had my butt kicked like that from anything in quite a while. We are going to forge ahead. Christina will keep an eye on the chat room though, as always.
I will.
Thank you very much for letting us know. We were talking about the big zooms we're going to take along, and I was saying that the most common question I get whenever I hold this thing up is, what lenses does it work with? Or will it work with such and such a lens? A week or two ago, somebody asked me if it would work with a Canon 10-18. Why would you want that? The short answer is no, it doesn't. It really only works with L series glass, and even that, there is a limited number of zoom lenses it works with. It does not work with a 70-300 IS USM and any of those lenses below. It does work with the 70-200s. You do lose your, it halves your aperture. So if your maximum aperture, if you're shooting with a 70-200 f4, that lens suddenly becomes a 70-200 f8, which that's a significant hit. And probably not worth your while. That's why you don't see people buying the $600 70-200 f4 and buying the $500 here and then walking around thinking that they have a really nice long zoom lens that is the equivalent of a much more expensive Canon lens. It just doesn't work that way. Light, physics, all of the above. But as I said last year, was about March of last year, I took this on a trip because I didn't want to take or rent a big long zoom, and I already have the 70-200 f2.8, so then it's kind of it's a worthwhile hit, I thought, in my mind, and I had a little video pros and cons. So if you want to hear more about it, watch that. But we're going to be holding this up against these bigger, longer zooms and kind of just compare and talk about the differences next week. So
great.
I feel a little scattered.
So in talking about our upcoming trip, we totally skipped the week ahead.
Or the week in review.
Or the week in review, or the weeks in review.
The month. It actually has been almost a month since we've last been with you. I know you've missed us. I know you haven't watched anybody else's photo shows to hold over while you wait. It's okay.
So do we want to talk about?
Well, briefly, I want to talk that you can't hold the GH4 because that's what we're using to review, but we both took a lot of pictures with it on this family vacation.
We did.
And how do you feel about using it as a stills camera?
It's all right. It's, I don't love it as much
Ringing endorsement. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
I just don't love it as much as a stills camera as I do a video camera, because it just... I think that it is mostly, I think it was designed to be a video camera, not a stills camera. And so the way, the experience when you use it, when you have it in your hands is more conducive to somebody who is going to be taking video as opposed to photo. I don't quite know how to explain it, but just the way that you get focus, the way that you sort of control the settings in the back. It's just a little bit different and not so intuitive for photographers. But if you're doing video, I do think that it is a great camera to use.
I know, I find that funny that you say that, because one of the reasons that I like the GH4 over many other mirrorless alternatives is it feels so similar to the 5D Mark III to me.
Really?
With the dials, the way it feels in the hand, the dials you use for shutter speed and aperture are basically the same. Nice touch screen. So it's very similar.
Yeah.
I will say I liked it a lot. I put it on silent shutter mode a lot and snapped away pictures so quickly. That's when it uses its electronic shutter, so there's no sound, no indication pictures being taken. You can shoot off a bunch of them very quickly. A lot of fun. I also experimented a little bit with the 4K photo mode, which is where you can shoot a 4K video and then walk back through that video and pull out 8 megapixel still images.
I tried that too, and I thought it was really overkill.
Well, I'll agree, because, and we've had this conversation way back early on when we first started this podcast, and we discussed the fact that I think in the future, we're going to be mostly running video and pulling still images out of that. And you really poo-pooed that idea.
Yes.
I think we're still headed in that direction, but the 4K photo...
In what way? Like, tell me how we're headed in that direction. I don't see how we're headed in that direction.
I think cameras now having this 4K photo mode. Multiple cameras have come out this year in the last couple of months that allow you to do this video.
That doesn't mean that people will actually use it in a practical sense or in like the real world, though. I mean, for me to like so this was the process. You set the camera for video, right? You take a short clip, you stop the camera, then you go and choose you like press like 2 different things. Like you have to navigate through the menu to find the option to select a still, and then finally once you're there, then you like have to scroll through and then find the frame that is the one that you want to use as a still. So to me, I mean, you're just like I mean, that's just adding to the time that it requires to like produce a photo.
I agree 100%.
Why would you do that? It just doesn't make any sense.
What we need is the software, either in camera or afterwards, to scan through the video and say, here are the sharp sections, here are people smiling sections. That's the next step to this process. Because right now it is incredibly tedious. It's not incredibly tedious, but it's certainly tedious to you know, you take video for 30 seconds, you have an amazing 24 frames per second, 30 seconds of video, you suddenly have just taken a whole pile of pictures, and to go through those frame by frame and find the one or two or three that you want to capture, it's not great. Certainly not great in camera. Really no good software on the desktop side yet to deal with that.
I mean, even if there was software and there was, you know...
I think you need to open your mind a little.
No.
Keeping it closed?
Yeah, I mean, it just... If you're trying to be, if you're doing photography as an art, and then you're just letting the computer pick the sharpest image for you, first of all, how is the computer supposed to know, besides a face, what it is that you'd like in focus? How is it supposed to know that?
It's going to get smarter. Google can already tell us what a kitty cat is.
So, what's your point?
I'm
just saying that, like, if you purposely photograph an object,
don't get too feisty now,
in the foreground, in focus, and you have the background out of focus, intentionally, the computer's not going to know that. It's just not going to know that. And even if it separates it into different kinds, you still have to like go through those sections and then pick out the best one. It doesn't mean just take the stinking picture. I mean, that's so much simpler.
We just got a show title. It's much better than my show title. Just take the stinking picture.
Jason Disbrow, he agrees with me. Thanks, Jason. We're both right.
Okay.
Just Jason.
I'm just saying that I think this is the direction we're headed. I'm not saying that I think this is better right now than photos. Definitely not. But
I don't think that that's the direction we're headed in. But
okay. Oh, future prognosticator.
I just don't think that a computer is ever going to replace the...
Ever?
No.
See, that's strong.
All right,
that's strong
fine.
words.
Not ever,
okay,
but
okay.
Not in the next like 50
okay.
years.
And also all of this hubbub to move this along here, because you got client calls at a certain time too. We got to get to.
Yes.
I have a question of the week that I wanted to ask.
Biker Boy agrees with me too.
What's that?
Biker Boy agrees with me too.
Okay. And that is, if you were given like $10,000 or $20,000 to make a photo coffee table book,
oh,
what would your subject be? What would you make your book about? What would you focus on? Leave it in the comments, leave it in the little chat window thing. We'll read out some interesting ones at the end. Also, in what, about 20, 30 minutes, we'll start taking, well, I know a lot of people are already asking questions and getting it answered by the chat room. That's awesome. Any questions you want us to see, hold on to those a little bit, because as they're going by now, it's hard for us to keep track of them. And so just keep that in mind. We'll be answering reader questions, some from Facebook and some from here in a little bit.
yes, we will.
So, moving along. What are we talking about next?
Well, oh yeah, so kind of exciting. So we're back in Vermont on Wednesday, and we were in Maryland before that. And on our way from Maryland to Vermont, we were able to stop at B&H and get a private tour, I guess we can call it a private tour, of the headquarters. And
Aspects of a private.
Yeah, and then a tour of the headquarters, and then some other rooms inside B&H that were pretty cool. So that was really fun.
Excuse me.
Proof that he was very, very sick.
Ironically, the cough didn't start until about an hour ago. Well, anyway, to get into it. Yes, so that was really neat. This was a little 3D printed thing. They've got 3D printers at B&H now going non-stop, it seems, printing all kinds of really cool stuff. And these were cool. The coolest room was the microphone room. I think.
Yeah.
And they were telling us that people come from all over the world. It is a completely soundproof, carefully built room with all 50, 60 different types of microphones all set up, all of them wired in. So in an instant, you can record, switch to through the patcher to this microphone or that. So people from all over who are interested in audio or looking at buying mics can hear what they sound like. And we also got a demo of the speaker room. Not really our thing from the standpoint of like we don't really talk about home theater systems, but that was cool.
It was
because
really
again,
cool.
In this room right off, and these are rooms you can go and ask to go into as well. They're just there in their store. If you haven't been to their store, it is just kind of like Toys R Us for photographers. The speaker room right off the thing, but you shut that door, again, the soundproof room, and they just cranked up the audio. And we have a lot of experience with loud audio at weddings. And so often it just starts to, it's loud, it's peaking.
It's horrible.
And in here it was loud but clean. Oh, it sounded nice. Sounded very nice.
Yep. So that was pretty cool.
I came away with that 100 to 400 loaner from B&H. Thank them very much for their support. And as I said, I'll have those other lenses out in Montana. We'll talk about those.
And they printed out their logo
I said
using
that. I think you're reading the chat.
I wasn't paying attention.
Yes.
All right. So moving on, let's talk about some news.
Let's talk about news.
First, CES. It was funny because we, long story short, ended up in Las Vegas after we went to California. Because it was cheaper to fly out of there. No, we went to visit for a day. It was all very
whirlwind.
Yeah. But anyway, CES was starting in just a few days. We didn't get to go. Spoiler alert. But we are keeping up to date with all of the announcements and all of the new technology that's being announced. So what are some things that you want to talk about?
Well, lots of drones, which is very interesting because we're still really waiting to see how that all shakes out with the FAA. They say they're going to come out with rulings. Nikon we'll talk more about in a second. Panasonic, I mean, really CES is the consumer electronics show. So you don't see your high-end releases here. You don't see your 5D Mark IVs. You don't see the other professional level cameras usually. So we got a lot of point and shoots. Panasonic's got a handful of little point and shoots. These are really all updates to current models. Nothing terribly exciting, nothing groundbreaking. They do, however, have released a couple different, with Panasonic and Sony, 4K camcorders. I would like to get my hands on one of these and really do a side-by-side with like the GH4. I hear, I don't get it as often now as I used to, but a lot of times people will be like, why should I buy a DSLR over a camcorder? Versatility of a DSLR is much higher. You can change lenses and you have a lot more options there. You don't with camcorders, but ease of use with camcorders, most camcorders is much higher. Focusing is easier because they got a smaller sensor, and so there's a greater depth of field. So Sony's got a 4K action camera as well. Now Canon came out with, and I've got that over here as well. Canon came out with this little action station, Connect station, the CS100. This is interesting. And my first question upon seeing it and seeing that it's compatible with all of these new little point and shoots was, is it going to be compatible with the next Rebel? Basically what it is it's an external hard drive and an NFC reader and Wi-Fi system. So you tap your camera to it and then it slurps the pictures off of that, it has to be a compatible camera, onto this 1 terabyte hard drive sitting inside this Connect station. And then it allows you through the software to share out to all of your computers, your mobile devices. It's pretty nice because one of the problems that a lot of families have, you've got, even us, we have shared vacation photos now because we're a family. And who's got what pictures when you want to put things together, or you want to look, or you're with a friend and you want to share and show them some pictures from the trip. So this really gives you a one-stop shop in your house for all of your pictures. Pretty nifty. Now, what is funny about my question of will a DSLR be coming along with that is we've got these pictures here from Canon Rumors, and actually I can't remember who it came from. I think Canon Watch, actually, yeah. Let's go over to Canon Watch because they had pictures, oh, maybe they're not actually on here, of this DSLR being used with the Connect station. What DSLR is it? Currently not any of the current ones, because look at the back of it. It has an articulating screen. You can see a little thumb spot to get the screen out. This is all we can see of it. It also, though, has a top LCD. It's very curious. Is it a T6i? Is it an 80D? Is it something else? Is it a mock-up? Some people have suggested it's just a fake camera that is never going to be released and is just being used for these examples. I don't know. I lean towards, well, you know, I really don't know. I keep going back and forth because I really would be surprised if they put a top LCD on the T6i. That would be very surprising to me. I don't expect an 80D anytime soon. Maybe in the fall.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
But it's just awfully early for that. So could there be something that comes in between? If it is, then we're talking about a very crowded marketplace now for these Canon DSLRs. But maybe that's what Canon's going to do. What do you think? What could it be? What do you want it to be? What do you think it is? We should, speaking of that, we should hear lots more about a T6i at the CP Plus, which is the next big photo show, Japan, February 12th to the 15th. So we're just talking about a month away. And as we get closer to that, we will probably hear more.
So
don't get distracted by that.
Well, I'm just looking and it looks like it was repeating. So anyway.
Okay.
So moving on. Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about from CES?
I think that was it from all of those. Yes.
So Nikon, they have announced a successor to the D5300, the D5500.
The D5500. Remind us what happened to the D5400.
It never existed.
It never existed.
Because of some, we don't know why.
Oh, well, was it in the Asian culture?
But that's not confirmed.
Oh, I heard from 2 people. That's enough for me to say confirmed.
But haven't there been 400s before?
Yes.
4000s before?
There's been a D4S, there's been a D4.
Right.
So, well, okay. Let's say that they heard from so many people when they released those models that they said we can never use a 4 again in our numbering system. So what I like is, I'm sorry, I can't remember who said this now on my Facebook page, but they said, you know, this is the weakest upgrade ever because it is basically the D5300 with a touchscreen. Now, to be fair, the D5300 is a very nice camera and I find myself recommending it more often than the T5i these days because for the money, it's come down in price a little bit, very good sensor in there. Really, I don't have much hesitations about recommending it. It's just a good all-around camera and it's nice and small too. But now it's got a touchscreen. Does that make it better? I don't know. The one thing that I find very interesting is it says one of the 8 frequently used camera settings about the touchscreen, focus point selection, AF area mode, aperture, ISO sensitivity, can be assigned to this function for use with viewfinder shooting, enabling immediate modification of the assigned setting and achieving practical operation by simply tapping or sliding a finger across the monitor while looking through the viewfinder. So JCB, you know, and somebody else were in a little bit of a discussion about this. I can't quite picture holding a camera up to my face and using the screen. So I don't know if there's some poor translation happening there or not. That's what I'm most interested to see. But otherwise, this is basically same sensor, same buttons, a couple changes here and there, slightly deeper grip like the D750. So, you know, I keep looking at the camera, but everybody's looking at the screen. So let's make it so they can see us again. So We'll see. Early February, it'll be available very soon, in less than a month, so I'll have my hands on a review unit, I hope, as soon as possible, and we'll be sharing my thoughts about it. Should anybody with a D5300 upgrade to this? No. No. Somebody who is about to buy a D5300, should they consider spending a couple hundred more for the touchscreen? I say wait and see. Let's see how good it is. Because really that's the only upgrade. Now I will argue that it is not necessarily the lamest upgrade in the history of recent upgrades, because the T4i to T5i was pretty lame. Body-wise, really the dial just went all the way around. That's it. And it was sold with an 18 to 55 STM, whereas the other one wasn't. So that really doesn't even count, because that's a lens, not the body.
And was that last year? That the T5i?
2 years ago.
2 years ago. Okay, so maybe they have something good coming now, or something, some actual updates coming now.
Maybe with a top LCD screen. What do you think?
I don't know. What I want to talk about, though, is the possible announcement of the 5D Mark IV. That is what I'm kind of waiting to hear about, because yeah, it's about time, and I hope that the changes that will come with that camera, if it comes, will be enough for me to want to upgrade. And if I don't see a new sensor, and I don't see some...
I feel like we're repeating ourselves.
Yeah, well...
Let's say this, latest rumor that we've heard is that they're possibly maybe splitting the 5D Mark III into 4 models. Similar to the Nikon side, where
you mean the 5D Mark IV?
Yeah.
Into 4 models?
3 models.
Into 3 models?
Right, yes. A super high megapixel version that might be a 5D Mark S. And then a Mark IV in 2 different models, one with the aliasing filter and one without the anti-aliasing filter. So for higher resolution, sharper images, or video, better video, less moire. Other things that we should see at CP Plus, jumping around, Nikon D7200. That's very likely to come. I'd expect that that would, well, I was going to say a touchscreen, but I don't know for sure. We don't know much else at this time. May or may not bump up in sensor. That sensor they're using is new as of the 7100 and the 5300, so they might keep that same sensor as they're doing in the 5500 as well. And I think that's all. We also have rumors of an 18 to 300 IS STM coming as well. So for those of you looking for video functioning in your Rebel or 70D with that huge range, that'll give it to you with that STM and smooth streaming, smooth technology. So this happens when I'm trying to talk and I'm looking over here at the same time and seeing that Christina's favorite camera,
the HTC or is it RE? Even the name sucks. Oh my God.
Does it really suck? Where is that thing? Right there.
Just looks like a little worm. It's like a worm.
I thought we decided that it looked like a little periscope. So this little periscope lipstick applicator, which we also saw around Black Friday, was being sold for half price. So that's never a good sign when something is outsold.
Why is this guy holding it like he's about to like fire
pew pew
a gun?
Pew pew.
Silly.
But what it can do now is via your phone live stream to YouTube. You know, these kind of things are nifty, and I like it. I still don't think the quality of this is good enough. What would be the benefit of doing this versus just streaming straight from your phone? Because your phone can do that as well. Can Androids do that? I know iPhones have a nice little YouTube app that can go straight to the web or straight to YouTube that we've never used. So it's neat. But I just really wanted to bring it up to so that we can just kind of tease Christina about her favorite camera every once in a while.
Okay.
Okay?
All right.
Now that reminds me though, one thing that I asked you all about and you said you wanted was the NX1 review. I did want that to be next. We tried over the holidays to make that happen and get my hands on that, but stock and shipping were a little low, and so that is going to happen after we come back from Montana with the Super Zoom. So that stuff will go away. The NX1 will come in. It got major firmware update or is coming very soon, a huge list of things. I have to say though, and I think you all feeling the same because I've heard very little about it since I've asked you if you wanted me to talk about it more. I feel like a lot of people are really cool about this camera now. Cool as in, okay. It's just not quite ready for prime time. That's not bad in that, you know, it offers a lot of really neat features and is groundbreaking in good ways, but then also is groundbreaking in bad ways, like shooting in H.264 requires humongous hours of transcoding if you really want to use it, and professionals aren't going to touch that yet. So it's a little ahead of its time, and I've read a lot of things from people I respect that are like, well, no. But I still like to talk about it, and for moms and dads who want really good quality and some really nice features, it might be a great option. So I will still get my hands on it and talk about it. You're checking your mail, so how can you tell us what's next?
Well, Toshiba announces first NFC-enabled SD memory card.
Yeah, so Toshiba also announced an update to their wireless air card. They're competitors to the iFi. Well, not Toshiba, but their wireless air card is. And it's something I get asked to review from time to time from folks, and every time I read the reviews, they sound pretty rough, and so I haven't touched it yet, but maybe I should give this third one a try. However, they've also announced an NFC-enabled one, and this is really interesting until you read what it does. It gives you a preview of the last 16 images you took on the card when you tap it to your camera. And it tells you how much room is left on the card. Doesn't your camera already do a pretty good job of telling you how much room is left on your card? It doesn't transfer pictures, as far as I can tell. Again, I wonder a little bit if translation here in the press release is lacking, but it really seems like all you can do is see thumbnails of the last 16 pictures taken. See them, that's it.
That does not
I don't know.
seem-
And
yeah.
again, this seems like a dying market, but it does remind me that my iFi card seems to now be crashing our 5D Mark IIIs.
Yeah.
You put it in the SD card slot, you turn the camera on, and the camera goes dead. Pull it out, turn the camera off, turn it back on, nothing. Battery pull, back in, then it's okay without the card. Every time you put the card in. Just started happening. But also the case remote, my review went out last week about that as well. We used the Sum on the trip for pulling images off the 5D Mark III because we also did shoot with that. You had an engagement session while we were out there in California.
I did.
So we had to bring the 5D Mark III, probably otherwise wouldn't have brought it.
Correct.
But I like this little device. It works quite well. Go watch my review of it if you haven't already. And it'll be really nice when they enable video. And also in my review, it crashed when I was pulling images off a couple of times. The developer has assured me that the latest update, I haven't tried it yet on iOS, fixes that though. He said, no more problems. So go give it a shot.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. So this is pretty interesting. Flickr has released, as they do I think every year, the most popular cameras of the past year.
That's right.
So dun dun dun, the top camera brand was Canon. And it was 13.4%. It wasn't like any super high percentage, but I guess, you know.
Well, when you take all of the different brands, I'm showing them now
Right.
this little chart that Petapixel has put together that shows 2014 versus 2013. I think the most interesting thing here is
Ooh, they're very similar.
Apple is
Oh,
now
Apple.
number 2.
Oh, wow.
Thus, I don't know what I'm going to say after thus, it is that adage of it's the camera you have with you that you're going to use. Everybody has
Right.
their iPhones with them. It's what they're going to use. But it's
Yeah.
interesting that, you know, Canon's hanging on there, and actually its percentage has increased just a little bit.
And so has Nikon.
So has Nikon's. So who dropped? And Samsung's come up. Sony's gone down. That's interesting. You would think.
No, it hasn't. It has gone up in percentage,
up in
but it
percentages,
has
but-
gone down in,
Right. Yeah.
I guess, whatever you would, just
Yeah.
hierarchy level.
So, but this is always really interesting. Flickr's got their own, you can go see this information, not as nicely as Petapixel has put it together, over on flickr.com/cameras. And what you can even do is you can then go in and say, show me all pictures ever taken with a Fujifilm X100S. And then it will show you interesting ones. And I think you can just keep going forever and ever and ever. Or you can even search by portraits with the X100S, which is really interesting. You've got to be really careful about this. So from time to time, people come to me and say, we need somebody to switch this stuff for us. We'll talk about that in a minute. They say, I saw all of these awesome pictures, or I saw all these blurry pictures on Flickr taken with the, Rebel T5i. Am I going to get blurry pictures? Whether the pictures look great or not on Flickr, you have no idea the amount of post-processing people have done. You can do an amazing amount of post-processing and not touch that metadata of camera manufacturer, and it's still going to say that it was taken with this camera. So just take it with a grain of salt. I think they also do have a lens searcher as well, which is a little bit more useful because then you can kind of get some ideas of the capabilities of lenses and how they're being used out there, and whether or not you see a lot of blurry bird shots, or I'm thinking of telephotos in particular. So it's interesting. It's interesting.
So we've got a few more articles to go through, but I think we should pick one or two to talk about and then move on to viewer questions. And
I don't think there's any more articles other than this. Well, I wanted to share this picture because this is cool. So I'm just going to do that real fast. And this is a moonlit, snow-covered United States seen from orbit, posted today. So the lighter area is, well, the bright areas, of course, are city lights. And that gives you a good idea of where you need to go to take nighttime star pictures here on the eastern seaboard or even in the Midwest. But the lighter area, of course, is the snow. And I just think it's really interesting to be able to see this so clearly where the snow is, and you can even see it kind of trailing down through the mountainous regions down here in Appalachia, and it follows the ridges and lines. They're in mid-Atlantic area as well. So I think that's interesting. And while I have the screen sharing on, let's switch over here and let's all be jealous of this 3200 megapixel large synoptic survey telescope, which is going ahead with plans for construction. Well, it's received funding approval, which doesn't mean a whole lot, so it's pretty exciting what it's going to be able to do and how much of the sky it's going to be able to capture in such incredible detail. So we look forward to seeing and hearing more about that in the future. 3200 megapixels.
Crazy. That is pretty crazy.
Yep.
Okay, so before we move on to viewer questions, we wanted to make a couple of announcements.
That's right.
So I will hand it over to you to make the first one.
Well, the first one is, 2014 was really exciting. I left my full-time job. I did this, I'm really proud of the amount of content I produced, the quality of content, the growth of this channel, and the interactions with you all, especially the interactions with you all. Those of you in the chat room right now, watching later, it's been fantastic. Really want 2015 to be just even better. We've got some incredible ideas for content, both video and written, in all forms, but we need your support for a lot of reasons. So I'm asking for funding. I've started a Patreon. There'll be a link to that right down below this video, and maybe we'll put a link into the chat too as well. And whenever I hear people ask for money, my first thing is thinking that it's about them. They want money, they want to get rich. But it really isn't. And I think that's true of most of these content creators too. They're not trying to get rich. I can't speak for all of them though, but I can speak for myself and say it really is about you and being able to bring you the content that you want. So there's just, as I said, a lot of fantastic ideas that we have. There are a lot of different ways to help this channel, and this is just going to be one of them. And so we'll put that link in the chat and just below. I'll be following it up with a video, but right now it's all written there as well. You can start with as little as $1 a month, and that is appreciated and thankful. There are higher amounts, and those amounts do get you increased access to content and quality. It doesn't mean that I'm taking anything away that we aren't already producing, or that we plan to produce free content at the same level and rate that we have been. To some degree. There are some we'll talk about that too. But it does give you a chance to access more content, which is always good. So let me pass that link into the thing so you can look that over. And while I'm doing that, you want to talk a little bit about workshops.
Well, so that is our second announcement. We are going to be starting to do hands-on workshops, and we're going to keep them very limited. And to find out more about these workshops, you'll need to be signed up to our newsletter.
Which I think almost all of you are in the chat room.
Yes, that's probably very likely. So if you're signed up for our newsletter, you will find out how to sign up for our very first hands-on workshop, which will take place in Seattle this upcoming March. We're very excited. It will probably...
It sounded like to me, that is much better. Okay. It's windy. Oh, man.
That is the computer fan working overtime.
Yeah. Okay, let's answer some questions and wrap this up. You have to go...
In 4 minutes.
In 4 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. I might stay on and answer questions a little bit longer to make up for this mess. I got a few other choice words. We'll explore this. We're going to run some stress tests and see if we can figure out what exactly is going wrong. I haven't changed anything. People are saying perfect now. We just basically stopped it and started it again. So that's a little frustrating. But, okay. So somebody said they were unhappy with their 24 sharpness on the Canon 7D. See if you can do some front focus testing to see if maybe it's just not aligned nicely with your camera. That's the first thing I would try.
Scott Robolot, he asked earlier, can you please explain the best way to clean the mirror inside of a DSLR? I would send it in.
Oh, the mirror?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could clean it with some...
The mirror's not very scary to think. The sensor swabs could easily clean the mirror as well. And you just be gentle as you would be to the sensor, but I find it even less scary. Really, what I do often is take the lens off. I have a rocket blower, which is those little puffer things. Hold it upside down. A few good compressed squeezes to that is usually enough to dislodge anything. If there's anything else on there, you could use one of those little sensor swabs. You want to be very careful that anything you're sticking in there isn't going to release more bits and fibers than you're taking off.
There's also kits, I believe, that...
Yeah, that's what the sensor swabs come in as kits.
Right, yeah. B&H sells kits that you can use to clean even your sensor, though. I would not recommend that. Real quick, before we go, just going to take a break here, and Dalibor just reminded me that we cut out during the Seattle workshop announcement.
There'll be workshop announcements coming via the newsletter this week.
So if you haven't signed up for the newsletter...
A lot of people have been asking about having us in the same room with them, hands-on, and these will be some opportunities this year. Yeah. Soon.
Newsletter. Sign up.
That's
if you haven't already. Okay. So, yeah, that's...
5D Mark II or 6D for your first full-frame camera?
That's tough. I would say 60.
I lean towards the 6D as well. The price has come down a lot. It's a nice camera. That center focusing point is better than the 5D Mark II center focusing point. And the ergonomics of it, I think, are just a little bit nicer. I'd go with the 6D, especially if you're talking about travel. and just general photography.
I guess Jason Disbrow just said, so licking your fingers and wiping the sensor isn't a good method?
No. I like the tongue too. Just get the tongue right in there. Why even bother with the fingers?
Okay, Gerald Meredith asks, any experience with the 5D Mark III underexposing in manual mode, even if the viewfinder meter shows correct exposure? All other modes seem okay. So first thing I'm going to ask you is, are you looking at the images on the LCD and deciding that they're underexposed when you look at them on the LCD or when you look at them on the computer? Because the LCD has brightness controls that when you are in a bright situation, if you're out in the sun looking at the back of the camera, the photo is going to be much darker. It's going to appear much darker, but it doesn't mean that it is darker. If you are, one thing that I would do is I would make sure that you have a histogram on when you're taking pictures, so that your histogram shows you whether or not, if it's leaning towards the left. I guess to you guys this wouldn't be the left, but if it's leaning towards the left, that means that it's underexposed. If it's leaning towards the right, that means that it's overexposed. So I would just try to pay attention to your histogram and see if you're exposing correctly. Don't judge the brightness of your photos or the exposure of your photos by just looking at the LCD screen. That is not a very reliable method to gauge exposure. Lastly, if you do find that it is actually underexposing, then I would send it in and have them take a look at the meter, because it means that the meter is not working properly. And I, unfortunately, am going to have to sign off for the night, but you're going to stay.
It's going to be fun to watch you climb out of here.
Yeah, so get ready for that.
Yes. I'm going to stay and answer a few more questions. Christina has to run off. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you all.
Okay.
Thank you for putting up with all that.
JP DeRose just wants to know Sigma 30 f1.4 or the Canon 35 f2 IS on a T5i. If you're going to be doing any kind of video work at all, he moved it a little bit, but that's all right. The IS, that 35 IS, is really nice. It's a nice lens. Ruby, you can say a lot of wonderful things about it. I know you're a big fan. I really like it as well. I haven't used it as much. It is, I want that lens. That would be a really nice lens as a walk-around video lens for my work. It'd also be nice to throw on the GH4 with the adapter, because you've got that IS. If you're just doing photos, though, you're not going to do any video, especially any handheld video. The Sigma 30 f1.4 is nice. I give the Canon a little bit better value, though. You don't have that f1.4 with the Canon, but it is a very sharp lens, even at f2. It's a very versatile lens. So, hope that helps. She's got a couple other questions over here. Will a 24 megapixel sensor be better in low light than a 16 megapixel? I have a Nikon D5100. I know that a full frame is much better in low light, but would more megapixels make any difference in a smaller sensor? Yes, they actually usually make it worse. But it's so hard to judge just by saying this megapixels versus that, because we have different manufacturers of sensors and we have different generations of sensors. So there are sensors with 24 megapixels like the D5300 that does much better than the 16 megapixel D5100. So it's really hard to compare. Basically, newer sensors usually are going to give you better results, but if you're comparing similar sensor densities, ones with smaller or less megapixels are going to give you better low light performance, because you're not cramming as much information in there and the noise doesn't get built up as much. It's keeping it kind of simple, but that's about it. And I saw Ruby said that the mirror of a DSLR is very, would you say, fragile or gentle? I mean, yeah, you still want to be careful, but a scratch on your mirror is annoying, but doesn't affect any of your pictures. A scratch on your sensor is going to affect every one of your pictures. So I personally don't get too nervous cleaning the mirror. I'm careful. But the sensor, I let Canon clean my sensor most of the time. So That's what I want to do as well. Best overall versatile lens for the T5i. Well, let's open it up and say best overall versatile lenses for crop sensor cameras. Family, indoor, outdoor shots, and video. I go back and forth. I really wish I could have nailed down and will say this is the one lens. The Sigma 17-70 f2.8 to f4, I like that. It gives you a nice range. You get that wider aperture at the lower range, but you get all the way up to 70. I think that's nice. It's a sharp lens. It's a good value. They also have the 17-50 f2.8, and that also is a very good lens. And you have 50 millimeters f2.8 is a very nice portrait length. That gives you good indoor low light capabilities all the way up to 50. So those two lenses right there are really good. I come back a lot to the kind of combination of one convenient lens, the kit lens or something similar in range to it, and a nice prime, either at the 30, the 40, or the 50 focal length. Those two things together basically allows you to cover just about anything except for wildlife or sports. You're going to need some kind of telephoto for that, unless you can convince them to allow you to stand on the field. So, other suggestions? I want to hear from you folks, which you think is a really nice overall suggested lens. Good way to find where exactly black dots are when looking through the viewfinder, not coming out on photos. Look with naked eyes and can't see anything. So they're either going to be on your mirror. So you're saying you look through the viewfinder and you're seeing black dots in there, but you don't see them on the picture. So they're either in your mirror, or they're in the viewfinder, or they're on the underside of the viewfinder where the mirror bounces the light up into. It's annoying. That's, again, you can kind of get the air blower up in there a little. Don't ever jam it. You never point it past if there was an earthquake and you suddenly, you don't want to do that. But you can blow some air in there and hope it gets around, or blow some air right in the viewfinder and see if it's there. You can send it in for a cleaning. The good news is if it's not showing up in your pictures, it's just annoying, and it's just annoying. So, for family, travel, kids, stills, photos, and less video, would you recommend the Canon 7D Mark II or the Canon 6D? How fast do your kids move? I would actually put it between the Canon 70D. I don't see anything you've said there that makes the 7D a good choice over the 70D. Get the 70D, save yourself some money, buy a nice lens or two instead, or the 6D. Do you want to shoot better quality images in lower light? I think the 70D. I know there's this, I feel like there's this feeling of, if I don't have a full frame camera, I don't have the best camera I can have. And the best camera is the one you have with you and is convenient to use. And the 70D with that articulating screen, that really easy to use, touch to focus, a nice size. The 7D Mark II is getting to be a heavy, beefy camera. I mean, it feels really nice in the hand. It's a little ridiculous with this lens on it right now. But I just think that, sure, you can get it. I mean, if you've got the budget, it's a fun camera to have. You actually want to be careful when you have it on the high burst rate, though, because you're going to fire off like 30 frames of your kids running, and then you're going to have to pick one or two to keep and get rid of the rest, and it's always hard to get rid of pictures of your own kids. So, yeah, I like the 70D. Sorry, I'm thinking about it. The 70D. This is where I need my co-host to fill in the silence as I think about these questions. But the 6D is a very nice travel camera. It also, you know, it doesn't weigh much more than the 70D. It doesn't have the articulating screen. The next model should, maybe could, and we should hear about that soon as well. So, yeah, and that's the other thing too. If you're thinking about the 70D, as Dalibor mentioned, the A6000. I have a review of that. Very positive. That's still my top pick for all-around mirrorless camera. It has all of the quality of the 70D. Really very little downsides. Battery life isn't quite as good, but so. Relayer, didn't I kind of just answer this? Your Nikon D5100 would moving up to a 24 megapixel improve low light pictures. Well, moving up to a D5300, which I think is what you're asking, your pictures are better. The sensor in the D5300 is better in low light than the D5100. Is it going to be a huge difference? No. Noticeable? Yes. I think you're better off from the D5100 to spend your money on a nice prime lens. That gives you much better low light capabilities and also then gives you the capabilities of prime lenses, controlling your depth of field, having better quality in a small lens. You sacrifice some convenience, but I think the trade-off is worth it, and the value you get for that is much better. Wait another generation or two, the D5600, or maybe Nikon will skip that and go straight to the D5700. Then you get that really good feeling upgrade of, you know, a whole stop of image quality increase in low light. That's what I'm trying to say there. What's better, the Canon 24-70 f4 or the 24-105 f4? 24-70 f4 is a sharper lens all around. The 24-105 is a good lens, but it's not an amazingly sharp lens. The 24-70 is very nice, and it has that image stabilization as well too. That would be my pick, but you can find the 24-105 for much cheaper, so keep that in mind as too. Miguel's curious about what the 6D Mark II will do to the 6D price. 6D price has already come down a lot, and here's what my experience in general, not just talking specifically about this, is at the higher end cameras, the price drop when the new model comes out is not as drastic as most people hope. 100, 150 here. It will start to creep down more over the next months afterwards, but right away there isn't any kind of plummeting and amazing because people recognize that these cameras still have good value. Just because there's a newer, better one doesn't mean the old one takes worse pictures all of a sudden. It takes the same pictures it did before. Yep. Okay, answer questions for just a minute more. 5 years and go through an astronomical change in sensor quality. Zoe, what did you change from and to? It's funny, if every once in a while I hear from people who are still holding on to their Canon Rebel XTs. That was one of the early digital Rebels that I started with. And they're upgrading to a T5i, and that is, Rebel XT came out, help me now, 90, no, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself, 2003, 4, somewhere in that general range. So 10 years people have held on to that camera. It's pretty impressive, and some of them it's working, some of them it's started to get a little screwy. So. And there's always, and that's another thing to keep in mind too, that people, when they're trying to say whether or not they want, I'm speaking to Chris C here, and the 6D Mark II will go up in price, or I'm speaking about his statement. I think a lot of times people say, should I wait? Well, remember, if you're waiting for the next model to come, it's going to come out at a higher price. It's not going to come out at the same price. So people that were waiting for the D5500 when they're, you know, have the D5300 in mind, thinking, oh, right now it's 800 bucks. Well, the D5500 is about 1,000 bucks with a lens. So you have to keep that in mind as well. Richard, I love the quality of the GH4 still images. I think they are plenty. I was not unhappy with the quality in all of the situations. And sure, it starts to get noisy at some, you know, some higher ISOs, but it's just a little bit of noise. And for family pictures, I don't mind. I don't mind at all. Okay. I do appreciate you all sticking with us through these bumps in the road we had tonight. I really appreciate that. I will put a link to Patreon right down below this video. Oh, I think I can do that right now, maybe even. Because it's one of the things I said is we would love to get the production value of this show much higher. We have a lot of good content that we want to share with you all, and we need your support to do that. So that's there. I will, and one of the levels of funding gets you better access to me, as I said before, and also initiates a weekly, or not weekly, but a regular live show, just Q&A, because this is a lot of fun. I love reading your questions, talking about them. It makes me a better photographer and better at what I do when I get all of these different questions in and I get to mull them all in. And again, thank you to Ruby and Roy for being in here and helping as much as you all do. Maybe I don't actually know if Roy is in here, but for helping back on the Facebook page as well. Thank you. So again, thanks. Sorry about the bumps, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.